Well, after the Holocaust, people were saying never again will we have that outburst of Semitism that was so virulent during the Nazis. But yes, it's still there. And the attack on the Pittsburgh Synagogue has shocked the world and exposed the dark growth of Semitism even after, well, this man went into the synagogue with hatred in his heart and screamed out the same kind of stuff. And it was said in the op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today, it's Amalek. You remember in the Bible, Amalek was the one who picked off the Israelis as they were coming back from Egypt. And he killed the stragglers. And that spirit of Amalek is still alive. We cannot have that anymore. And so, folks, that's something we want to pray about, stand against, and say we will not tolerate anti-Semitism of that stripe. So you're watching the 700 Club, and we've got a wonderful... And by the way, today, our chief prognosticator, John Waggy, is here. He will tell you what's going to happen in the Senate, and let me tell you, he is accurate, and these others aren't. Terry?
Well, after all that's happened this past weekend, synagogues across the country are on alert because of the hatred that was exhibited there as the global Jewish community mourns a great loss, 11 people killed. CBN's Mark Martin brings us the latest on that.
Just one look at the suspect's now deleted social media post shows the hatred Robert Bowers spouted for Jews, with anti-Semitic rhetoric, Holocaust denial, and conspiracy theories of Jews destroying the planet. On the social media site Gab, Bowers wrote, "Jews are the children of Satan," and angrily posted about the Jewish community's work helping bring refugees into the country.
He had sought out this one synagogue because of activities that they had done working with refugees and immigrants.
Saturday, his hatred turned deadly as Bowers, armed with an AR-15 and 3 handguns, killed 11 members of the Tree of Life Synagogue. 4 police officers were injured in the attack. Thousands of mourners gathered Sunday night to remember the victims. Among the dead, brothers David and Cecil Rosenthal, Cecil remembered as a gentle soul.
You don't get a more innocent, harmless individual who doesn't have an ill bone in his body.
The Anti-Defamation League says the attack is part of a rise in anti-Semitism across the nation, with the numbers jumping radically last year.
We saw a 57% surge of acts of harassment, vandalism, and violence directed at the Jewish community across the country.
The outrage from the hate-filled attack stirred strong reactions.
This evil anti-Semitic attack is an assault on all of us. It's an assault on humanity.
The president's daughter Ivanka, a convert to Judaism, tweeting, "All good Americans stand with the Jewish people to oppose acts of terror and share the horror, disgust, and outrage over the massacre in Pittsburgh." The Israeli cabinet held a moment of silence. Prime Minister Netanyahu saying the people of Israel stand united with their American brethren. Christian leaders are responding in kind. Christians United for Israel founder John Hagee calling out the sin of anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism is a sin, and as sin, it damns the soul. Bonhoeffer said, "To see evil and not call it evil is evil."
Meanwhile, Bowers faces 29 murder and hate crime charges. The U.S. Attorney General for Pittsburgh will seek the death penalty in the case. Mark Martin, CBN News.
You know, I was in Eastern Europe right after the fall of communism, and I was simply astounded. I mean that literally, simply astounded when I went to Romania, where they had maximum 3 million Jews, maximum. And there was this unbelievable anti-Semitic feeling there in that country and in Poland and other those countries like Hungary. I couldn't believe it. But the stain of Nazism has lived, and why is it? Well, there is a devil, folks. There is a devil, and the devil hates the people of God. And the Jews are an evidence of God's love. They're his chosen people. Through the ages, they brought forth the scriptures of what is the Old and the New Testament. The Bible that we cherish is essentially a Jewish document. And the religion we share, the Christian religion, is grew out of Judaism. And Jesus was a Jewish rabbi. Keep that in mind. Jesus was Jewish. And, you know, why does Satan hate this? Because it's an evidence that there is a God in heaven. And we serve him, and the devil doesn't like that. And so, well, the people who do this are, frankly, they're servants of Satan, whether they know it or not. Well, the synagogue shooting was the latest in a rash of hate crimes in America. We wish it weren't true, but it is. Ephraim Graham has more.
Pat, the man accused of sending at least 14 explosive devices to critics of President Trump appears in court today. Cesar Sayak is facing federal charges in connection with mailing bomb-like devices to top Democrats and media personalities. He faces up to 48 years in prison if convicted. Meanwhile, a Kentucky man faces possible hate crime charges in the killing of 2 black people at a grocery store in Louisville in a suburb last week. Police say Gregory Bush tried to enter a predominantly black church just minutes before going to that Kroger grocery store and opening fire. In the wake of all this violence, at least one spiritual leader is calling on God's help. Pope Francis praying this weekend, help us extinguish the flame of hatred in our societies. Americans still decide their political disagreements at the ballot box, and in a week, voters will make their choices for the House and Senate. Some Senate races are tighter than expected, including Indiana. Even though that contest is 500 miles away from the White House, CBN's Amber Strong reports all roads lead back to President Donald Trump.
It's a tale of 2 candidates sounding like they're from the same party.
Together we'll build the wall.
Or at least following presidential footsteps.
I support ICE in funding President Trump's border wall.
But hold on, one is a Democrat, so what gives?
It's like no matter where you go these days, the Trump administration is on the ballot. Indiana Senate candidate Mike Braun says for him, that's a good thing.
The businessman is banking that Trump's appeal to conservative Hoosiers and his similar plea to blue-collar workers could be enough to carry him to victory against incumbent Democrat Joe Donnelly.
The system needed to be shaken a little bit, and I think that's why Donald Trump was elected.
Braun tells CBN News his experience tackling issues like health care within his own company surprises some voters.
And then they got surprised that I was actually a business guy that took on health care, which is by far I think it's the biggest issue across the country.
But Indiana is a big state, and not everyone is ready to welcome a Trump-like candidate. According to an Indianapolis Business Journal poll, the 2 candidates are polling neck and neck. But taking a deeper look, Braun has gained ground since the Kavanaugh confirmations, but Donnelly dominates with 2 groups, young people and women. Donnelly talks about being one of only a few pro-life Democrats on the Hill. He voted in favor of Neil Gorsuch, but against Brett Kavanaugh.
I voted against Judge Kavanaugh because of concerns about his impartiality and concerns about his judicial temperament.
That decision could make the difference for this candidate by keeping the Democrat vote and wooing modern suburban women who aren't so happy with the president.
In a midterm, they can't vote against the president because he's not on the ballot, so they're taking it out on some Republican candidates. But that's just one slice of the electorate. I mean, the dirty secret about close races is that everyone matters.
And he's right. A Republican source in Indiana tells CBN News that same decision to vote against Kavanaugh re-energized conservatives to get out the vote and push for judges and the Supreme Court.
I know in our own state that has really galvanized a lot of folks that may have been kind of resting on the laurels of the Trump campaign.
While his campaign ad may sound similar to Trump, Donnelly says unlike most of his colleagues here in Washington, he has the ability to work with the president and against him.
62% of the time I've voted with President Trump. Mike was for Judge Kavanaugh on the first day. If President Trump put up Bugs Bunny, Mike would have said he should go on the court.
CBN News requested an interview with Senator Donnelly, but his office said he was unavailable. Braun says Donnelly's moderate talk is all a facade.
All of this is being done in an election year, and I go back to the things I remind Hoosiers of is that he voted against tax reform, voted for Obamacare originally as a congressman, voted against its repeal.
The Jasper, Indiana native says, like most people where he comes from, what you see is what you get, even down to his blue button-down.
I decided not to put on the suit coat and the tie that evening, because I'd never worn one in 37 years. Anybody from where I grew up and came from would have said, Mike looks like he's different.
Time will tell which message clicks with Hoosiers. Election day is right around the corner. Amber Strong, CBN News.
Just one of a few tight races to watch, Pat.
Well, I know you're interested. We don't want to be all that political, but nevertheless, there's a huge election coming up. And CBN News political analyst John Waggy is with us. He's been going over these latest polls and election prognostications. John, I want to start out with, there are a couple of people who are Democrats who keep talking about the Democrat blue wave and all that stuff. How accurate have they been in the past?
Well, you know, a lot of people missed 2016, Pat, and I know one forecaster who's well respected, Nate Silver of 538, has put out just in the last couple days that Democrats have about an 84 to 85% chance of taking the House. Prospects much better for Republicans to keep the Senate. But in the House, you're hearing a lot of gloom and doom, whether it's the Cook Political Report, Larry Sabato, a lot of the Washington-based analysts of Congress, and they're all pretty much saying the same thing, that the Senate looks fairly good for the Republicans, but the House is going Democrat. And yet we just see in Real Clear Politics this morning, we see evidence that Republicans are making gains on Democrats, and that it's going to be. You
remember that election? I got so sick of listening to Fox saying, "Well, there's no path to victory, no path to victory for the Senate, for the president, for Trump, I should say." And we worked through the math. You and I were sitting there, and we worked through the math, and we said Trump has not only a path to victory, he's going to win.
Right. And the same Nate Silver, who is predicting doom and gloom for the Democrats, had Hillary Clinton with a 72% chance of winning on Election Day 2 years ago. So nobody really knows, and you have to analyze the momentum.
Let's look at the Senate now. You've added a couple more seats to your prognostications. You want to talk about them?
Right. When I was here a couple weeks ago, Pat, we were talking about the polls showing a net gain of 2 Senate seats. But if you look at the map now, whereas previously we had Republicans, you see them in the red there, 4 Republican Senate seats are being defended in close races, and we had 6 Democrat. Now it's up to 10, and all that blue in the north, it's a little bit hard to see, but those northern states, we've added Minnesota, Michigan, New Jersey with Bob Menendez, who's under some ethics troubles, and the fourth one is no, I'm missing it now. But
did you say Michigan?
Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and New Jersey. Those are the 4 we've added to the ones that were already on the list for tight Democratic races.
John James is an extraordinary man. He's a veteran. He's a vowed born-again Christian, and he's way behind Stabenow, but what's happening there?
Yeah, it's interesting, Pat. In September, James was 23 points behind Debbie Stabenow. The most recent polls show him about 6 points down to Stabenow, so he's really been closing. And, you know, she's a veteran 2-term senator, but not just the Senate race in Michigan. There are also Attorney General races, governor's races, and a couple House races where it's tightening and Republicans are gaining on the Democrats. So Michigan is one we're watching. Another one is Minnesota. In Minnesota, there's a special election for the seat that Al Franken vacated when he resigned. The governor appointed Tina Smith there. That has closed to about six points now. And so Karen Housley, a former television reporter, is making a hard charge. President Trump has been out to campaign on her behalf. And Minnesota is an interesting state because it came very close to going for Trump in 2016, but it narrowly voted for Clinton.
They do strange things like electing a wrestler as their governor and so forth.
They do, and I think, you know, turnout obviously is going to be important everywhere, but in a state like Minnesota, I think turnout is really going to be critical.
New Jersey, Menendez, they've got him for consorting with prostitutes. He's been accused of preferring one of his buddies and giving him a prominent position.
Yeah.
He cleared the ethics hurdle, or did he clear it?
He did clear it, but there are other questions that are being raised, and his opponent in the race, Bob Hugin, is really pounding away at those issues, and it's down to about 5 points in some of the polls. That's quite a pickup for Hugin. Now, there are traditional Democratic analysts who say, wait a minute, New Jersey always votes Democrat in the end. Not always, because we had Chris Christie, we had Christine Todd Whitman. That's right. So occasionally a Republican can break through. We'll see if these ethics attacks will have some sort of effect in New Jersey.
And now the Republican seats, you've got Ted Cruz in Texas, you've got an open seat in Tennessee.
Right.
You've got the seat in Arizona. You want to talk about them?
Yeah, I would say, and then you also have the incumbent in Nevada, Dean Heller.
Yeah, right.
So those are the four. If the Republicans hold those four, and I believe they are going to hold those four, but it's really tight in Arizona right now. Martha McSally moved out to about a 6-point lead last week. There's an overnight poll that shows Kirsten Sinema leading by 3, which is within the margin of error, but McSally has not pulled away in that race. But if you say that the Republicans are going to hold all 4 of those seats that they're now defending, then the rest is kind of gravy. I mean, you're going to see how many of those 10 Democratic-held states they're going to pick up.
Is Cruz looking good in Texas?
Cruz is about 6-7 points up, but Beto O'Rourke has an incredible war chest and a lot of enthusiasm among liberals in the cities in Texas. But Cruz has been holding pretty steady. Of course, they had that massive rally recently in Houston with President Trump, and they sort of made up after the 26th campaign.
100,000 people or more.
Yeah, 100,000 waiting to get in.
My.
So it's looking now. I said here 2 weeks ago that if you combine all the polls together, the Republicans probably make a net gain of 2. I'm upping that to 4 right now, and we still have 8 days to go before Election Day. I think Republicans would, if we counted them all right now, Republicans would gain 4 Senate seats, which would give them a 55-45 margin. But, you know, you can see with all the events we've had in the news and everything, the tragedies and the early voting and all these kind of things, a lot can change just in the next 8 days.
Well, I don't know what surprises out there, but actually it could go as high as 5 seats, can't it?
It could go as high as 5 or even higher. I mean, if you look at that upper reach, if we have a Republican surge in the last days, which I'm kind of thinking might happen, then you could see it go upwards of 8. You know, it's not out of the question. But, you know, that's still a reach at this point. So.
Well, Mitch McConnell, they've got a rump session. He's going to call them back in to approve a whole bunch of Trump's appointees.
He is. And McConnell has been dogged in this pursuit of especially judicial nominations and everything. And, of course, that in itself is driving voter turnout, not just the Kavanaugh debacle where there was such a savage attack on him, but this whole idea of Trump fulfilling his 2016 campaign promise on judges, and McConnell, you know, joining right with him to do it. I think that's energizing, especially the conservative base, not necessarily the Republican base, but definitely the conservative base.
One of the big, the issue, the Kavanaugh vote, the issue, that huge mass of migrants trying to storm the borders, or what is the issue?
Well, they just keep coming, you know, closer to the border, and you know, Trump has gone down there. McSally in Arizona, who is the congresswoman for a border district, has come out, you know, foursquare for stopping this. That's kind of a little bit politically risky thing to do in Arizona, but we'll see if it works out. But the politics of it are intriguing, because I don't know that voters are necessarily going to all take to the streets and shout out what they're thinking. They may just quietly go to the voting booth and make their views known.
All right, now, we're going to talk about the House. I think you're coming back in a couple of days.
I'll be back on Wednesday, and we'll talk more about the House. You know, it's in such flux right now, it's difficult to get a grip on it. But we do see a trend of Republicans moving up. They kind of, within the last week, have had to run the table of all these incumbents, say 2 to 3 dozen incumbents that they need to hold on to. There's only one Democratic incumbent in danger of these toss-ups, and about 27, 28 Republican incumbents, and they would have to all hold on. But we're seeing movement toward the GOP in these closing days. So we'll see what the numbers boil down to. But it's really close.
Very interesting. But I think the idea of a solid win in the Senate, I mean, if the Republicans have a solid grip on the Senate, then they won't be dependent on a couple of wavering members.
That's true. But they really do need the House to go with it. And there's so much that can happen in the remaining time that it's a time to pray and a time to vote, both.
Well, I think that's it. It's pray and vote. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to say people have said, well, how come I've got to vote? Well, Jesus said, render to Caesar what is Caesar and to God what is God. What is Caesar? What does Caesar get? Well, Caesar, frankly, in this democratic society, or, whatever we call this thing, a republic, is you. You are Caesar. And your intelligent citizenship is something that God Almighty demands. So don't say you're going to sit home. You've got to get out and vote, and you've got to vote intelligently. So anyhow, you can watch election night coverage, by the way, on our CBN News channel. To find the channel in your area, go to CBN News website. Our election coverage will also air live in the Freeform channel on at 11 p.m. on East Coast time. So we'll have all that, but we'll see if John is right. And John, we'll look forward to seeing you. Is it Wednesday you come back?
Wednesday I'll be back, and all next week. So looking forward to it, Pat.
Look forward to it. All right.